Hey everyone. So, as you may know, I have been making my own RPG, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. Um, so, I'm locking it in. The name is Ruptured Moon, and essentially, and this is a pen and paper RPG, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons in a way. And I'm explaining some differences, but um, the story for it essentially is that there was a wizard who got a little carried away and uh, ripped a chunk of one of the moons out, and it came crashing down to the planet. And when it hit, it created this massive tidal wave that wiped out two whole continents, just clean, right? Basically, nobody left alive. A few people in the high grounds, like in the mountains and stuff, but totally decimated. And in the process, it also destabilized the orbit of the moon, and ever since, the moon has been coming closer and closer to the planet. And there's I'm a good chunk of the way into writing the first campaign, which is called The Falling Moon, and it's basically about that struggle to, um, you know, this is 100 years or so in the future, and it's kind of the struggle of trying to get people to stop the moon from falling, stop somebody who wants to accelerate it, uh, all with the backdrop of geopolitical infighting and everything that kind of gets in the way. And yes, this is kind of an allegory, but I think I might be beating somebody over the head with this one. But then the next one, I'm also kind of doing an allegory. And the next one, I'm not going to tell you about what that campaign will be, but for now, you'll see it in the future. I do plan on. I think that we have plans to do some playtesting for the RPG and the first campaign coming up soon. So we're going to start doing playtesting. I'll probably post pictures or something on Twitter, or maybe something on Instagram. Who knows? But the game itself essentially is a classless D6 RPG. So D6 being that rather than playing with the 20-sided die, 8-sided die, 10-sided die, 12-sided die, 6-sided, 4-sided, etc., you just play with 6-sided dice. And you basically only need 2 6-sided dice per person. And the classless side of it is that essentially, rather than being, I'm the knight, or I'm the wizard, or I'm the thief, or whatever, you kind of build your character however you want to, and you can call them basically whatever you want. Obviously, it might be better for some people to specialize in a particular category, because as you get better at, say, I guess it requires a little bit of a push, from level to level in a particular field to get really good at that thing. So, for example, spellcasting, there's 6 schools of spellcasting, which each kind of have their own methods and specialty. Whether you want to be offensive damage or crowd control or healing or mitigation or summoning or whatever, right? And basically you're when you cast a spell, you actually roll like you were to attack, except you're not necessarily, in most cases, attacking somebody with your spell. With the roll, you're actually seeing if you were just successful at casting the spell. So, you know, you can be very unsuccessful casting spells and not cast them even though you have them and you know them. And so you might want to put, points essentially into the different spell casting abilities and skills. And then there's, in order to get the higher level skills, you have to get, the higher level spells, you have to get your skill that corresponds to that spell school, up in level. So it kind of, the system that it creates is, if you want to specialize, if you want to be very, in a way, very pigeonholed, like if you want to have this specialist, you can do it. But if you want to diversify your character, he's, two-hand sword, but he also casts spells and, doesn't wear armor or something like that, you can do it. And it could actually be just as viable in combat or even out of combat, depending on your specializations and such. But that's kind of the point, is that I'm trying to give people the freedom to be whatever kind of character they want, and then let the game mechanics allow them to do it. So with the dice rolls, one somewhat unique aspect of this game is that when you roll the dice, like let's say I'm attacking, right? I'm attacking somebody or whatever. I roll the dice, and then I add my attack modifier to it, right, to see how well I am, how successful, or if I'm successful in hitting them, right? Which is very similar to other games. And you compare it to their evasion, right, or their dodge. So in some games, this is your armor class or whatever, but essentially it's, my roll plus a modifier. Is it better than their ability to avoid being hit? Cool, you hit. So far, pretty much like other RPGs, but what I do is I don't then disregard the roll and apply damage or roll a different set of dice for damage. I actually take that same roll and add a different set of modifiers, being your damage modifier, to that same roll, and then I'm subtracting their armor from it. So it's another set of mitigation on their end, which means that you can have a character that specializes in dodging, or you can have a character that specializes in having heavy armor and high defense, or somewhere in between. And then same thing with attacking. You actually can specialize in hitting opponents very often, or hitting them hard, or somewhere in between. And really, one of the things that I wanted to accentuate with this system was that if you hit your opponent, how well you hit them is basically kind of determining how hard you hit them too. So it's almost impossible to I guess like a complaint that I have had with a lot of other RPGs was, you roll like a 19 out of 20, right, on your attack, and you're like, yeah. So story-wise, you squarely hit them, right? You hit them in the head or chest, and it's like, this could be brutal. And then you roll your damage dice and you roll a couple of ones, and you're like, okay, so I did just wailed them and barely anything. And that doesn't really happen in this. What also doesn't happen in this is being nicked from an attack. So because there's a kind of a base dodge, you essentially don't barely hit someone and hit them for basically nothing. You can barely hit somebody, but you still hit them with a battle axe. Like, it doesn't matter if you barely hit somebody with a battle axe. That's going to hurt. And that's kind of part of the point. I had fumbled around during a lot of playtests with the early iterations of this game, trying to make it so, squarely hitting them meant more damage, like a lot more damage, and barely hitting them meant nicking them. But I didn't want to add a whole bunch of layers of complexity, more dice rolls, more time required to add and subtract numbers. So this is kind of the system that I landed on. But I do look forward to showing you more about the game, and that kind of stuff will come as we're playtesting it. I am working on the art for it, which is taking a lot of time. I'd say that the kind of rule, like the core rule book, is, I tell people it's 96% done, which basically is I am waiting for playtests to go through. Once we're done with the playtest, then I'm going to go back and make some revisions, reword some things to make it a little more clear, format everything so it looks a lot nicer, and then throw in the artwork, then reformat everything. Spell check and stuff like that. So that's basically kind of the last little bit, but the actual game mechanics and most all of that stuff is pretty much done. So it really is coming down to kind of a little bit of a waiting game in that sense. But I do continue to work on the art pretty much every day, almost every day. And I work on the campaign almost every day, a little bit every day, basically, to kind of keep it moving along. I'm hoping that I'll have the end of the camp, like I'll have the campaign done by the time the playtest gets to that point, because it's going to take several weeks to get there. So, and then I'll move on to making the second campaign, which I'm excited for. Right. So that was basically what I wanted to say. I wanted to keep this video a little more simple, a little shorter. Oh, I did change up my lighting a little bit. I got a little piece that's allowing me to put my pixel tube horizontally. I mean, I had everything else, but I was just literally missing another attachment to put it on a light stand. And now I have that. So yeah, that's basically it. Nothing else here. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, everyone.